Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dan Gersten, host of Chatting with History, where you can listen into conversations that I have with some of the most famous characters in the history of Western civilization. And today's guest is no exception. It's Galileo Galilei, physicist, mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher who played a major role in the scientific revolution. So, without further delay, let's meet Galileo Galilei. Signor Galilei, buongiorno, and welcome to the show.
Well, Dan, buongiorno to you too. And please, call me Galileo. Everyone calls me that, except for the Catholic Church.
And what do they call you?
Heretic, a blasphemer, devil worshipper, son of a Satan, well, all sorts of not nice things, and simply because I had the nerve to question accepted dogma and suggest that the universe did not revolve around the earth, but rather around the sun.
Yeah, what nerve? Only kidding. Anyway, we'll get into that later on in the show. But first, why don't you tell us about your childhood?
You betcha. I was born in Pisa, Italy. You know where the Leaning Tower is? I was born on the 15th of February in 1564, the first of 6 children of Vincenzo Galilei and Giulietta Amanati. My papa was a famous lutenist, composer and music theorist who also traded in wool.
And I understand that you were a pretty accomplished lutenist yourself. Having learned to play from your father.
That's so true. But as good as I was no Jimi Hendrix. I learned other things from my papa.
Like what?
Well, like the value of a well-measured or quantified experimentation, an appreciation for a periodic or musical measure of time and rhythm, and well as the illuminative progeny of mathematics and experiment.
The illuminative progeny of mathematics and experiment? What in the world does that mean?
The wonderful and enlightening things you can discover when working or playing with numbers, equations, and formulas. Stuff like that.
Oh, playing with numbers. Kind of like buying lottery tickets or counting cards. Anyhow, it's said that your father also taught you a healthy skepticism for established authority.
That's so true. Although at the age of 11, I was set to study in a Jesuit monastery, and after 4 years, I told my papa I wanted to be a monk. Talk about being skeptical about authority, huh?
Yes, I'd think the last thing a person who's skeptical about authority would do, is join a religious order. Still, that didn't happen to you. Did it?
Not at all. My papa, he always wanted me to study medicine because doctors make a lot of money. So he withdrew me from the monastery, and in 1581, when I was 17, I entered the University of Pisa to study medicine as my papa wanted.
We're told that while there, at the age of 20, that you noticed a lamp swinging overhead while you were in a cathedral. And curious to find out how long it took the lamp to swing back and forth, you used your pulse to time large and small swings.
That's so true too. And I was surprised to learn that the chandelier took the same amount of time to swing back and forth no matter how far it was swinging. Now I then went home, set up 2 pendulums of equal length and swung one with a larger sweep and one with a little smaller sweep. And again, they kept the time together.
And this discovery would later be used 100 years later in 1656 by Dutch scientist Christian Huygens to create an accurate timepiece. The Pendulum Clock.
He was inspired by me. I had the idea for Pendulum Clock in 1637, which was partially constructed by my son Vincenzo in 1649. But neither of us lived to finish it. I guess you could say that our own clocks were stopped ticking.
Guess so. Anyhow, I understand that while you were at the university, you were pretty bored with everything except mathematics.
You see, I was not doing well, and the university informed my family that I was in danger of a flunking out. Imagine, me flunking out. Anyhow, a compromise was worked out. Yeah, that's it. It was a compromise where I would be tutored a full time in mathematics by the mathematician of the Tuscan court. And I talked to my reluctant papa into letting me study mathematics and natural philosophy.
Natural philosophy? Like there's an unnatural one?
You funny guy. No. Natural philosophy back in my day was philosophical study of a nature and the physical universe. It was dominant before the development of modern science and considered to be the precursor of natural sciences such as physics, which, by the way, I also enjoyed.
In 1585, family financial difficulties caused you to leave the University of Pisa before earning a degree.
Yeah, see, and my family was not what you would consider wealthy, and musicians like my papa were not making the bigger bucks some musicians earn today. Plus, I had 2 sisters, and if they were to marry well, then there had to be a nice dowries. And then there was my brother Michelangelo. No, not that painter dude who had the hots for Leonardo. My brother was also a lutenist, and like I said, there's no money doing that. It's why my papa wanted me to be a doctor. Anyhow, Mikey was a financial drain on the family. Why, later on, he'd even be a drain on me, borrowing funds to support his musical endeavors and excursions, which, of course, he had no intentions of paying back.
So, you left the university. Now what?
Well, I made some money by touring students in mathematics and with minor teaching positions, all along seeking to be on the mathematics faculty at a major university. But I got to be honest with you. I had a way of being, abrasive and, arrogant. And I offended many people. So when there were vacancies, the lesser qualified people would be chosen ahead of me.
In 1586, you published a small book on the design of a hydrostatic balance. What in the world is a hydrostatic balance?
Put simply, it's a way to find the weight of an object submerged in water to determine its relative density. Now, it was based on the principle of Archimedes, one of the leading scientists in classical antiquity. Plus, weighing precious metals in air and then in water was a common practice among jewelers. Now, I had some ideas about refining the practice, and in 1586, when I was 22, I wrote a little tract named La Bilancetta, or the Little Balance, in which I illustrated the mixture of both the theoretical and the practical.
And this brought you to the attention of the scholarly world. In 1588, you attained an instructor position in the Accademia delle Arti del Disegno in Florence, which was the first academy of drawing in Europe. Established in 1563. There you taught both perspective and chiaroscuro, which is marked by the use of strong contrast between light and dark. Affecting whole compositions and often used to achieve a sense of volume in modeling three-dimensional objects, such as the human body.
See, and while in Florence, I was inspired by the artistic tradition of the city and the works of the Renaissance artists, acquiring what could be called an aesthetic mentality. At this time, I also met Ludovico Cordi, and he and I became lifelong friends.
Yes, Ludovico Cordi, also known as Sigoli, was an Italian painter and architect whose works include Ecce Homo, which now hangs in the Palazzo Pitti, as well as St. Peter healing the lame man, which is in St. Peter's. Also a painting called The Sacrifice of Isaac. Relative to you, Sigoli painted a fresco in the dome of the Pauline Chapel of the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome, depicting the Madonna standing upon a pock-marked lunar orb, which is believed to be the first extant example of your discoveries about the physical nature of the moon.
See, up until then, the moon in the pictures of the Virgin always had been mythical and smooth. Cigoli, thanks to me, depicted the moon as it really looks.
Also in 1588, you presented 2 lectures before the Florentine Academy, addressing something that they had been arguing over for 100 or so years. Namely, what were the location, shape, and dimensions of Dante's Inferno?
That I did. Durante degli Alighieri, simply known as Dante, was a major Italian poet of the Middle Ages, and as he's from Florence. His epic poem, The Divine Comedy, is considered the greatest literary work composed in the Italian language and a masterpiece of world literature. Anyhow, in the first part of his poem, he travels through hell. And again, people have been arguing over the dimensions of hell for a long, long time.
You know, it's said that in attempting to address the dimensions of Dante's Inferno, that you laid the groundwork for your theoretical physics, and that the audience was impressed. And in 1589, you received a 3-year appointment to the University of Pisa.
See, that was a very gratifying, since I had to leave that school before I could graduate.
And, it was around this time that you, supposedly challenged the universally accepted belief attributed to Aristotle, an ancient Greek who was viewed at your time and, still viewed today as one of the most important founding figures in Western philosophy. Namely, that the velocity of falling bodies is relative to their weight.
Oh, that. Well, some story, no?
Yeah, some story. So, why don't you tell us about it?
Well, it has to do with the experiments on the falling objects and this skepticism toward authorities that my papa had taught me. So I set out to disprove Aristotle's law that heavier objects fell faster than lighter ones.
And how did you supposedly do that?
Well, either I or a student of mine supposedly went to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa with some balls of a different weight, which were dropped at the same time. And guess what? They landed at the base of the tower at the same time.
And supposedly, this experiment was witnessed by a huge crowd of students and professors and resulted in you writing a manuscript titled De or Di Moto, meaning on motion.
Again, some story. There is no evidence that this experiment of mine took place. It appeared in a biography of me by Vincenzo Viviani, a pupil of mine, but not in any account of my own. Plus, that a manuscript, well, some say it was never published. As for me, I'm not saying.
Regardless, challenging and criticizing Aristotle, was not a popular thing to do. And, coupled with your arrogant nature, you continued to be isolated among your colleagues. Possibly resulting in the University of Pisa not renewing your contract in 1592.
Screw them. It was their loss.
Anyhow, still in 1592, you moved to the University of Padua, teaching geometry, mechanics, and astronomy until 1610.
See, and it was a good thing too.
Why is that?
The year before, in 1591, my papa died, and I was entrusted with the care of my younger brother, Miki, a lutenist who was no Jimi Hendrix. I was now the head of my family, and debts were pressing down on me, most notably the dowry for one of my sisters. So it was good to have a paying job.
Seems just like today. Teachers in your day didn't always make big bucks, and you had to find ways to supplement your income.
That's true. I needed to invent some sort of device on which I could make a profit. So in 1593, I invented a thermoscope, which showed changes in a temperature, as well as a device to raise water from aquifers. But at last, there was no market for them. But in 1596, I invented a military compass that could be used to accurately aim cannonballs.
And this invention turned out to be a commercial success.
You betcha. Just like today, there's money to be made in weapons and military or defense contract.
In 1597, a modified civilian version of your compass came out, which could be used for land surveying.
You see, and I made a big profit on those because they sold for 3 times the cost to make. I offered classes on how to use it, and the actual tool maker was paid dirt poor wages.
Wow, a regular vulture capitalist.
Hey, it was nothing personal. It was just a business.
Around this time, while on a trip to Venice, you met Marina de Andrea Gamba and started a relationship with her. I mean, she moved into your house in Padua, and you had 3 illegitimate children with her. I mean, 2 daughters, Virginia, born in 1600, and Livia, born in 1601, and a son, Vincenzo, born in 1606.
You see, we had a relationship, what you might call common law today. When I left Padua for good in 1610 for Florence, I took my 2 daughters with me. Vincenzo stayed with his mama and joined me about a year later. When Marina died in 1612 at the age of 42, I put my daughters in a convent.
Yes, Victoria became Sister Maria Celeste and died in 1634. Livia became Sister Archangela and died in 1659. Vincenzo, well, he became a lutenist, like his grandfather and uncle, and he passed away in 1649.
That's so true. And my son was a lutenist like my papa and brother, and like them, he was no Jimi Hendrix.
I get it. None of the lutenists in your family was a Jimi Hendrix. Anyway, on holiday in Venice in 1609, you heard rumors that a Dutch spectacle maker, a Hans Lippershey, had invented a device that made distant objects seem near at hand. A device that at the time was called a spyglass, and which later became known as a telescope.
See, and since there was no patent as yet granted, I was determined to construct my own. After a frantic 24 hours of experimentation, I built a 3-power telescope.
And later, you refined it to be a 10-power telescope.
That's so true. On August 25th, 1609, I demonstrated one of my telescopes to Venetian lawmakers. They were highly impressed, and I was honored with proclamations. More importantly, some Venetian merchants saw the telescope's value for spotting ships and paid me to manufacture several of them.
Yeah, but this isn't what you wanted to do. I mean, was it?
No, it was not. Well, in the fall of 1609, I trained my telescope on the moon.
I understand that you first became famous as an astronomer when you observed and then commented on a supernova that occurred in 1604.
Oh, see, it was a brilliant burst of light in the constellation Ophiuchus that was visible to the naked eye. It was brighter than any other star in the night sky and all the planets except Venus. And it was visible during the day for over 3 weeks.
Today, it's known as Kepler's supernova, named after Johannes Kepler, a German mathematician, astronomer, and astrologer, who began observing it in Prague on October 17, 1604, and who observed and tracked the star for an entire year, writing a book on the subject.
A big deal. This event convinced me that it was a distant star, disproving Aristotle's belief in the immutability of the heavens, that they did not change.
Another case of going after accepted dogma and Aristotle. And in so doing, you pissed off a lot of people who strongly opposed you.
What you gonna do? Besides, I was right and they were wrong.
Anyhow, back to you training your telescope on the moon.
See, well, when I looked at the moon, I was astonished to see that the moon's surface was uneven and rough and full of cavities and prominences.
Hell, everyone knows that.
Not in my day. People believed that the moon was perfect, smooth and polished. So when I told people what I had seen, many did not believe me. What jerks.
On January 7th, 1610, after improving the telescope so that it magnified things 30 times, you turned your telescope toward Jupiter. And what you saw would change the way people looked at the universe and would eventually get you in trouble with the Catholic Church.
That's all right. I observed what I thought were three fixed stars, all close to Jupiter, and lying on a straight line through it. Observations on the subsequent nights showed that the positions of these stars relative to Jupiter were changing in a way that would have been inexplicable if they had really been fixed stars. And on January 10th, one of them had disappeared, which I attributed to it being hidden behind a planet. Now, within a few days, I concluded that they were orbiting Jupiter.
Yes, you had discovered 3 of Jupiter's 4 largest moons. And on the 13th of January, 1610, you actually discovered the 4th one. Moons that are now referred to as the Galilean satellites and are now named Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, after Greek mythological lovers of Zeus, whom Romans referred to as Jupiter.
And if you know anything about the time in which I lived, you can imagine what happened when I told people what I had found.
I'll say, your observations created a revolution in astronomy, that reverberates to this day.
See, a planet with smaller planets orbiting it did not conform to the principles of Aristotelian cosmology, which held that all heavenly bodies should circle the Earth.
Yeah, amazing what people believed at one time. That the universe revolved around the Earth, that the Earth was flat, that humans existed at the same time as dinosaurs. Oh, wait. Some people still believe that bullshit today.
One of the things I learned was that stupid and ignorant people will always exist, and that any science disproving what they believe is evil.
You got that right. Anyhow, many of the astronomers and philosophers of your day initially refused to believe that you could have discovered what you discovered.
See, but in 1611, my observations were confirmed by the observatory of Christopher Columbus, a noted German Jesuit mathematician and astronomer, and then I was received as hero in Rome that year.
Subsequently, you continued to observe Jupiter's moons, and were about to obtain remarkably accurate estimates of their periods, a feat which Kepler had believed impossible. Additionally, you discovered that Venus exhibited a full set of phases, similar to that of the moon, and observed the planets Saturn and Neptune, as well as sunspots and the Milky Way. Finding it to be a multitude of tightly packed stars.
See, I like to look at the heavens through my telescope. It sure beat looking into the windows of my neighbors. They were so boring. Except for Sophia.
Sophia? Anyhow, it was first by observing and studying the night sky, that you came to your notion of heliocentrism, that planets revolved around the sun.
That's so true. But I had the work of Copernicus to build on.
Yes, you did. Imagine that at one time, the prevailing theory in Europe and elsewhere was that the Earth was the stationary center of the universe, that stars were embedded in some large outer sphere which rapidly rotated, almost daily, and that each planet, as well as the sun and the moon, were embedded in their own smaller spheres.
Like I said, amazing what people once believed. Anyhow, Nicolaus Copernicus, a Polish mathematician and astronomer, advanced his theory, which included that the sun is at the center of the universe, and that the center of the Earth, while not the center of the universe, is the center of its gravity and of the moon.
It should be noted that Copernicus's theory was attacked and challenged primarily on religious grounds, being countered to biblical references in Psalms, 1 Chronicles, Ecclesiastes, and especially the story of the Battle of Gibeon in the book of Joshua, where Joshua's prayers caused the sun and the moon to stand still.
And they think that my dropping of balls off the Leaning Tower was some story, though those tales in the Bible are real doozies.
Tell me about it. I especially love it when Christian clergy attempt to interpret the Old Testament. The book of my people. Hell, it's not even their book. Anyhow, opposition to Copernicus's theory also manifested as a questioning of his method and assumptions so as not to make it about religion versus science.
You see, and the opposition continued long after Copernicus had died. In 1616, the attacks on his ideas had reached a head, and I went to Rome to try to persuade the Catholic Church authorities not to ban them, as I felt that they were not contrary to Scripture. Unless, of course, you were anal and took them literally, especially when the Scripture is a book of poetry and songs and not a book of instructions or history.
Yeah. And how did that go?
Not too good. In the end, a decree of the Congregation of the Index was issued, declaring that ideas that the sun stood still and that the earth moved were false and altogether contrary to Holy Scripture. And they suspended Copernicus's book on the movement of celestial spheres until they could correct it.
No surprise here. I mean, it's 2013, and you still have people taking Scripture literally. I mean, making decisions about what books can be read or taught or in libraries, and trying to repress the ideas and thoughts of others that don't conform to their own restrictive beliefs and anal way of thinking.
You see, the times they change. As some people, not so much.
So, the book basically bans the ideas of Copernicus.
You see, I was informed by Cardinal Bellarmine, but by the way is now a saint, that the ideas that they condemned could not be defended or held, and ordered me to abandon them.
But that didn't stop you, did it?
Me. Stop a me. Me whose papa taught to be skeptical of authority. Ha! While ordering me to abandon Copernicus's ideas, they did not prohibit me from discussing heliocentrism as mathematical fiction, and it was ambiguous as to whether I could treat it as physical possibility. Anyhow, I stayed well away from the controversy for the next several years.
In 1632, it all came to a head again when you published your book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems.
Oh, tell me about it.
Okay, I will. Seems you were asked by Cardinal Maffeo Barberini, a friend and admirer, to write a book presenting the pros and cons of heliocentrism without taking a position one way or the other. And he asked you to present his views as well in the book, which were geocentric. Anyhow, long story short, the book was published and critics within the church were all over it, saying it advocated heliocentrism, attacked Aristotelian geocentrism, and made the views of the cardinal, who by then had become Pope Urban VIII, look simple.
See, not the reception that I had wanted. In 1632, I was ordered to come to Rome to stand trial, and in February 1633, I was brought before the Inquisition, during which I steadfastly maintained my innocence, that I did not advocate heliocentrism and was not defending it in my book. Why, I was even threatened with torture.
In June of 1633, the Inquisition delivered its sentence, finding you vehemently suspect of heresy, namely, holding the opinion that the sun lies motionless at the center of the universe, and that the earth is not the universe's center, and that it moves, an opinion declared contrary to Holy Scripture.
They also banned my book, and the publication of any of my works was forbidden, including any I might write in the future. And lastly, I was sentenced to formal imprisonment at the pleasure of the Inquisition, which was commuted to house arrest, under which I remained the rest of my life.
And, how was that?
Not too bad. Except for this device I had to wear around my ankle. It sure made me hard to find a comfortable position in bed.
I can only imagine. In 1634, you were allowed to return to your villa at Arcetri near Florence. There you dedicated your time to one of your finest works, Two New Sciences, summarizing work you had done some 40 years earlier on the two sciences now called kinematics and strength of material.
You see, in 1638, I went completely blind. And in 1642, after suffering fever and heart palpitations, I died on January 8th at the age of 77.
At the time, the Grand Duke of Tuscany wanted to bury you in the main body of the Basilica of Santa Croce, next to the tombs of your father and other ancestors, but that was nixed by Pope Urban VIII and other church leaders.
Yeah, so much for forgive and forget, eh? But anyway, I was initially buried in a small room in the basilica, and in 1737 reburied in the main body, having a monument erected in my honor.
I understand that at the time you were reburied, that 3 fingers and a tooth were removed, and that one of these fingers, the middle one from your right hand, is currently on exhibition at the Museo Galileo in Florence.
I see. That way I can give the finger to any Catholic priest who visits, and to anyone who takes Holy Scripture literally.
Well, we've just about come to the end of our show, and I'd like to thank you, Galileo Galilei, for being our guest. As is customary, are there any parting words which you'd like to leave with our audience?
Oh, you betcha. I'm considered to be one of the major figures in what is known as the scientific revolution. It was a time of developments in mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, medicine, and chemistry, and it transformed views of society and of nature. It is said to have begun in Europe toward the end of the Renaissance and continued through the late 18th century, influencing the intellectual social movement known as the Age of Reason or the Enlightenment. Now, maybe there was some enlightenment since in the 17th and 18th centuries, societies in Europe were reformed using reason, ideas grounded in tradition and faith were challenged, and knowledge was advanced through the scientific method. It promoted scientific thought, skepticism, and intellectual exchange, and opposed superstition, intolerance, and some abuses of power by the church and the state. And the scientific revolution of which I was associated overturned many traditional concepts and introduced new perspectives on nature and man's place within it. Still, I've been watching what's going on today in the United States, and I have been surprised, and not in a good way, with what's going on in a country that once led the world in education, mathematics, and many of the sciences. Why, except for this Sputnik, the United States brought the heavens and the universe closer to Earth with programs like a Mariner, a Pioneer, Voyager, and Apollo, landing on the moon, launching the Hubble telescope, remotely exploring Mars, and having the space shuttle. And advances have been made by Americans in mathematics and in sciences that have made people smarter and their lives better. So, it's perplexing that I see what I and others are calling a war on science going on in the U.S. In particular, during the George W. Bush administration, Republican and Tea Party lawmakers continually took and still take positions against issues like global warming, evolution, bioethics, alternative medicine, and pollution, and are continually cutting government funding for education, research, and environmental protection. Plus, these same Republicans and Tea Party politicians and their supporters seem to be from back in my day thinking that there should be no separation of church and the state, and placing Holy Scripture above facts and the science, and importantly, using the Bible to dictate how people should think and behave. Listen to me. It's 2013. America, wake up. Too many people in your country want to move backward to time before there was scientific revolution, age of reason, or enlightenment. Average people want this because they are the stupid and the ignorant. The church and Christian clergy, as well as rich people and corporations, want this for just one reason: money. Wise up, America. It's 2013, and I'm not seeing much of an enlightenment. Disappointing. Feh.
Words of wisdom from Galileo Galilei, one of the leading figures in the scientific revolution of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, who was condemned, threatened with torture, and placed under house arrest for questioning religious dogma and those who took Holy Scripture literally. And here it is, the 21st century, And in the United States, a country that just 40 to 50 years ago led the world in mathematics and many of the scientific disciplines. Yet now, it seems to have regressed. I mean, in some regards, back to Galileo's time, if not earlier. I mean, with people taking Holy Scripture literally, using it to dictate social policy, and in so doing, deprive people of rights they've fought hard to win, like a woman's right to choose, and rights deserved, but yet not extended, like marriage equality. Why, here it is in 2013, with the theory of evolution challenged, and books being written to advance the notion of divine creationism, and that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. I mean, unbelievable. Anyhow, until our next Chatting with History, I mean, this is Dan Gersten, reminding all of you that a better future, I mean, for all of us, will never happen by going backwards. Thank you for watching.
Talk to me. Talk to me.